Some men see things the way they are and settle for life the way it's always been. John Sengstacke only saw things the way they should be and never settled for anything less.
The most significant thing about John Sengstacke was what many people criticized him for being the symbol of. He was bullheaded. Obstinate? Oh yes, one of the most obstinate men I ever met. And we had many arguments, and I think we got to the point we enjoyed it.
I knew him. Even after I left the paper, he assisted me in getting my business started. And I was his tenant right until the day he died. And I often laugh that he never got it out of his head that he was no longer my boss. And ultimately I came to realize that he was not going to get it out of his head, and if we were going to continue to get along, I had to accept that he was the boss, and we got along famously after that. And he was not self-effacing, nor was he self-promoting.
Born John Herman Henry Sengstacke, November 25th, 1912, the oldest boy of 7 children and the son of a preacher, he was a product of Savannah, Georgia. His great-grandfather was an industrious German sea captain. His grandfather was raised in Germany, but returned to Savannah in the mid-1800s and became publisher of the Woodville, Georgia Times. The family had a strong journalistic heritage. His uncle, Robert Sengstacke Abbott, founded the Chicago Defender, a weekly publication in 1905.
My uncle, I think, is responsible for the migration from blacks to the north through the Defender. And he had a lot of problems with it because at that time, and even when I came here, it was against the law, more or less, to sell the Defender in the southern states. In fact, the postmasters would not distribute the Defender, even though it was sent through the mail. And the reason the Defender and my uncle got circulation throughout the country because the Pullman porters delivered the Defender. We couldn't send it through the mail. And if they were caught handling the Defender, something would happen to them in Mississippi and all the southern states. Through the underground, blacks read the Defender. And Mr. Abbott said and told them about Chicago, and they ought to leave the South and come to Chicago. And he's been credited with encouraging blacks to move from the South to the North. And that's a part of history. We are a cause press. That's why it was started. Freedom's Journal, started by John Rushworth and Samuel Cornish. Reverend Samuel Cornish was the first black newspaper in this country, 1827. You see? And we've been fighting ever since then, and we're still battling today for equal opportunity.
John Sengstacke came to Chicago in 1931 at the age of 21. And by 1934, after graduation, he became Mr. Abbott's assistant. Soon after, he was promoted to vice president and general manager of the Chicago Defender as his uncle's health declined. Although segregation was rampant in America during this time, John Sengstacke saw only what should be, and in 1940 was inspired to call together a meeting of Negro newspaper publishers from across the nation and invited them to attend an organizational meeting at the Wabash Avenue YMCA in Chicago. Only 20 publishers attended the conference, and on the morning of the first session, February 29, 1940, word came that Mr. Abbott had died. Amidst the pain of losing his dear uncle, he moved on. The National Newspaper Publishers Association was born from that conference, but Sengstacke knew there were many publishers who sent representatives to that first meeting and did not attend themselves. Soon afterwards, he called upon his good friend Mary McLeod Bethune, a confidant of Eleanor Roosevelt, to encourage President Roosevelt to meet with the newly formed NNPA at the White House. This move was successful in drawing all of the publishers to the organization, and the NNPA began moving forward.
Years ago, we didn't have any advertising at all, and we sold a premium product. And 80% of our revenue came from circulation. There's no question about the fact that the black press has influence in advertising, because going back over the years, and if you talk about segregation and discrimination, a black person looking in the white press at an ad, they wouldn't know whether they're welcome or not. If it's in the Defender, it relieves all doubt.
John Sengstacke became publisher of the Chicago Defender in 1942. In the years that followed, he continued the tradition set forth by Mr. Abbott and maintained the Defender as a cause press, with a mission to be an advocate for the rights of African Americans and a purpose to fight for justice for all. He used his influence to plead the case on many social and political fronts, including the integration of the U.S. Armed Forces, the political structure in Chicago, which was fast becoming a mecca for Negroes during the Great Migration, and even the hiring of the first Negro in Major League Baseball.
John Sengstacke refused to cave in and follow the misinterpretation of integration.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when the riots came, like baseball, well, we had all witnessed it. I saw one of the last Black World Series, and I was just beginning at the Defender, of the Negro Leagues. They went out of business with Jackie Robinson. So Sengstacke did not accept the idea that now that a few black people can be on TV or write columns for white-owned newspapers, that the black publication should go out of business. So instead of folding, he established a daily edition of the Chicago Defender.
1956.
That's right. They said, look, we don't have to go out of business, just compete with the white newspapers. He also had the idea, too, that black entrepreneurship was one of the most significant things, most significant decisions that blacks had to make across the board.
Never ceasing and never satisfied with what might have been, John Sengstacke saw power in numbers. He founded and acquired a number of legendary African American newspapers. If one newspaper could reach thousands, 10 could reach millions.
This is one world. We are not an island unto ourselves here in the United States like years ago we used to be when it takes you 2 months to go to Europe. You see, you can get there in a few seconds. But all this stuff we got up in that's going around the earth, if we don't get together, we are going to destroy ourselves, all of us. I'm concerned about the world today. It really bothers me what's happening. And I may not be here, but at the same time, I'd like to see the world and all of us get together.
Appointed by presidents, decorated by heads of states, called on to sit and chair great boards and champion worthy causes, John H. Sengstacke, publisher, businessman, husband, father, and friend, boarded the train bound for glory on May 28, 1997, at the age of 84. His legacy firmly in place, his works deeply rooted in the pages of history, his footprints embedded in the sands of time. He will be remembered for never settling for the ordinary and always fighting for the common man.
Chicago Defender paper, Chicago Defender. Chicago Defender paper, like it or not, much of Brownsville's been forgotten, but the ones who lived its story is most forgotten.